They told him he'd never own a note of it, so he wrote slave on his face, walked away from millions, and came back years later to take it all back.
Wave your hands in the air like you don't care.
Welcome back to Soul Letters, where we remember so you never have to forget.
Do you remember?
12 real fights, 12 real lawsuits, 12 artists who took on the labels for the one thing the industry never wants to give up,
As we dance in the night, remember?
the actual tape. Every song on this list, so pull it up while I tell you what it really cost to make. Number 12, Betty Wright, No Pain, No Gain. By the mid-1980s, Betty Wright had already scored a Grammy and a string of hits.
We're all entitled to make a mistake. I was earning my man while I was learning my man. No pain, no pain, no gain, no gain. Got to prepare for some heartbreak, something you young girls might not understand.
But she was tired of watching other people control what happened to her own voice. In 1985, she founded her own label, Ms. B Records, betting on herself when nobody else would.
There was an old lady sitting under a tree, and she said to me, my days left here may not.
She wrote and recorded No Pain, No Gain, shopped it to 20 different record companies, and every single one of them turned her down flat.
You'll learn this secret, how to forgive. Anything worth having at all is worth working for on a string. Just because that man was bringing them flowers and candy.
So she released it herself, on her own label, with her own money behind it.
Sometimes flowers mean maybe we should just be friends. Order to get something. Be a cook in the kitchen, a lady in the street. Gotta give something in order to. You can't show your teeth to every guy you meet.
The song took off, climbed to number 14 on the R&B chart, and the same executives who'd rejected it started calling her back, begging to pick it up.
It's alright to be a little sweet. Pain, no pain, no pain, no pain, no pain, no gain, no gain, no pain, no pain, no gain.
Betty famously told them she'd bake the cake herself, and she'd be eating it herself too, making her the first black woman in history to score a gold record on a label she actually owned. Number 11, Cameo, Word Up. Larry Blackmon built Cameo into a 13-piece funk powerhouse through the late 70s, touring hard and charting steadily, but every master recording still belonged to somebody else's label.
All pretty ladies around the world. So tell all the boys and girls, tell your brother.
In 1983, he made a radical move, relocating the entire operation from New York to Atlanta and stripping the group down to a lean 3-piece unit built entirely around his own vision.
Do your dance quick, mama, come on. When you hear the call, you got to get it underway. Put on those airs and act real cool.
That same year, he founded his own label, Atlanta Artists, distributed through Polygram but owned and controlled by Blackmon himself, one of the first artists of his era to pull off that kind of deal.
No romance for me, mama, come on. When you hear the call, you got to get it underway.
3 years later, Word Up dropped under that very structure, an instant #1 R&B smash that crossed over to the pop top 10 and went platinum worldwide.
We don't have the time for psychological romance.
That unmistakable snare crack producers still chase decades later exists because Larry Blackmon refused to let a company own the sound he built from scratch. Number 10, Sylvia Robinson, Pillow Talk. Sylvia Robinson had already lived through an industry that routinely left black artists and producers uncredited and underpaid.
Can't compete with this pillow talk. Oh, you can't find love on a one-way street. Takes two to tango, takes two to even compete.
So in 1968, she and her husband Joe founded their own label, All Platinum Records, to keep control in their own hands.
Can't compete with this pillow talk. What I teaching you tonight. Boy, you never no friends who tell me wrong from right.
She wrote a sultry, breathy demo called Pillow Talk and originally offered it to Al Green, who passed on it because the lyrics clashed with his religious beliefs.
What your friends all say is fine, baby.
Rather than let the song die, Sylvia stepped back into the vocal booth herself and recorded it on her own label's Vibration imprint, credited simply as Sylvia.
Would you, baby? La la la. Borrow that man some coal and
The song exploded to #1 on the R&B chart and #3 on the pop charts,
let's get together before the day turns you on from 8.
earning her a gold record and a Grammy nomination, all while every master and every dollar flowed through the company she and her husband owned outright. Number 9. Earth, Wind and Fire. September Fire into one of the biggest acts on Columbia Records.
Do you remember when love was changing the mind tonight?
But like every act on the roster, the label held the actual recordings. Rather than simply re-sign, White negotiated something almost unheard of at a major label in 1978.
How the stars roll the night away.
Launching his own imprint, Arc Records, distributed through Columbia, but built and run by White himself.
My thoughts are with you, holding hands with you. We knew love was here to stay. Found a love to share something more.
The very first release to come out of that new arrangement was September, a joyous, horn-drenched single that shot straight to #1 on the R&B chart.
Sound bell was ringing, was singing. Do you
It became one of the most enduring feel-good records ever made, still playing at weddings and parties nearly 50 years later, and it exists because Maurice White refused to keep making history for a company that wouldn't let him own a piece of it. Number 8. George Clinton, One Nation Under a Groove. George Clinton built Parliament Funkadelic into one of the most sampled catalogs in music history.
Here's a chance to dance our way.
But by the 1980s, a company called Bridgeport Music controlled the publishing on dozens of his songs, and for years he couldn't touch the master recordings either.
Oh, with a groove I've only got Alicia. Ready or not, here I come. Ready or not.
He spent the better part of 2 decades in courtrooms fighting to reclaim what he'd made, watching his own funk empire get sliced apart by contracts signed during the industry's messiest years.
If you want what you're looking for, do you promise to bomb the whole bump? Nothing.
Then in 2005, a federal judge in Los Angeles finally ruled in his favor, returning ownership of the master recordings for 4 full Funkadelic albums directly to Clinton.
To dance my way, yeah. My feet don't fail me now. You know I'm bound. I know they do. I say they do. Ready.
Including the one carrying One Nation Under a Groove. It was a genuine legal victory decades in the making, proof that even funk's founding father had to drag the industry into court to get back what was his. Number 7. Anita Baker, Sweet Love, turned Anita Baker into a star overnight, pushing her album Rapture past 5 million copies sold.
You, baby, will see my eyes.
But for over 3 decades, the master tapes belonged to Elektra and Atlantic, never to her.
Sweet love.
In March of 2021, Baker went public, telling her own fans directly to stop streaming and buying her catalog until her masters were finally returned.
It'll always be this way. There's no square. I'll never go. Wait and see.
Arguing copyright law meant they should have reverted years earlier. It was a bold, uncomfortable stand for a notoriously private artist, and it worked far faster than anyone expected.
Stay right here. Sweet love.
By that September, she announced the entire dispute was settled and the masters were finally hers, later crediting Chance the Rapper with helping push the deal across the finish line. A ballad from 1986 became living proof that the fight for ownership never really has an expiration date. Number 6. The Isley Brothers, It's Your Thing. The Isley Brothers spent 3 frustrating years at Motown, watching bigger opportunities go to other acts, before walking out the door in December of 1968 to reboot their own label, T-Neck Records.
I can't tell you, it's your thing, man. Do what you wanna do.
Weeks later, they wrote, produced, and released It's Your Thing entirely on their own terms, and it exploded into their biggest hit yet, selling nearly 2 million copies almost overnight. Motown wasn't finished with them, though. Berry Gordy's company sued, claiming the song had actually been recorded while the brothers were still under contract, dragging the Isleys through not one, but 2 separate federal trials over the better part of 2 decades. In the end, a jury sided with the brothers, ruling the song was made after their Motown deal had lapsed, meaning every master, every royalty, and every ounce of credit belonged entirely to them. Number 5. Stevie Wonder, Superstition. Stevie Wonder signed his first Motown contract at just 11 years old, and for a decade, every dollar he earned sat locked in a trust.
There is superstition, writings on the wall.
Controlled entirely by the label that discovered him. The day he turned 21 in 1971, that original contract expired.
Let us about to fall. That ain't my thought, baby.
And instead of quietly re-signing like Motown expected, he walked away, financed 2 full albums with his own money, and taught himself synthesizer programming from scratch.
7 years of even things you don't understand.
He came back to the negotiating table holding finished music instead of empty promises, and Motown blinked first, handing him full creative control.
Rid me of the problem, the war that you carry. Keep it going strong.
His own publishing company, and ownership of the master tapes to everything he recorded going forward. Superstition was the victory lap. A number 1 hit built entirely on his own terms that kicked off the most celebrated creative run of his career. Number 4. Curtis Mayfield, Superfly. Curtis Mayfield had already watched the industry underpay black artists for years.
Darkest of night with the moon shining bright. Things going on. The man of the hour.
So in 1968, he co-founded Curtom Records with his manager, determined to never sign away another master recording again.
Oh, Superfly. You don't ask no questions why. The only game.
It became one of the first black-owned independent labels in America, giving Mayfield complete control over everything he wrote, produced, and released under his own name.
Hard to understand, but a hell of a man. But a weakness was shown, cause his hustle was wrong.
In 1972, that independence paid off in spectacular fashion when Superfly, the soundtrack he wrote entirely on his own terms, sold over 1 million copies.
You're gonna make your fortune bad. But the only game you know is to hustling times and ghetto
and became one of the most influential soul albums ever made. Every master on that soundtrack belonged to Mayfield through Curtom.
aim of his role was to move a lot of blow. Trying to get on. What does it mean? He wouldn't know. Don't ask no questions why. The only Superfly.
Proof that a black artist in the early 70s could build an entire empire outside the major label system and still dominate the charts doing it his own way. Number 3, Ray Charles, Georgia on My Mind. Just before his Atlantic Records contract expired in 1959,
Every time I sing this song,
Ray Charles sat down with executives from ABC Paramount and walked away with something no major label had ever handed a black artist before.
I sing for this whole street.
The deal gave him one of the highest royalty rates in the business, full creative control as his own producer, and, most remarkably, guaranteed ownership of his master recordings once the contract ran its course.
Georgia, and the song of you is moonlight.
Almost immediately, that new freedom paid off. Georgia on My Mind became his first ever #1 pop hit in 1960.
Oh, I feel it reach out to me. Other arms reach out to me.
A record built entirely under the new arrangement he'd fought to secure. Decades later, artists still point to Charles as the gold standard.
I said, don't smile tenderly. Still is. Keep Georgia on my mind. I know.
One producer even calling him the only one who ever truly pulled it off, since not even Frank Sinatra had a deal that generous at the time. Number 2, Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come. Sam Cooke watched other artists get exploited for years before deciding to rewrite the rules for himself,
In a little tent.
founding his own publishing company, and, in 1959, becoming the first major black artist to launch his own record label.
Oh, and just like the river I've been around.
In 1963, working through his new manager, Cooke restructured his entire RCA deal so his recordings would pass through his own company instead of going directly to the label.
Long time coming, but I know. Oh, yes, it will. But I'm afraid to die.
That restructured deal gave him something close to full ownership over his own work, just months before he sat down and wrote A Change Is Gonna Come, arguably the most important song of his career.
But I know. Oh, yes, it will. Hey, brother, help me, please. Knocking me. I could last for long. A long time coming, but I know.
He never lived to see how far that fight would carry his legacy, since he was killed just weeks after finishing it. But the ownership blueprint he built became the model every single artist on this list would eventually follow. Number 1, Prince, Purple Rain. By the early 1990s, Prince had already given Warner Brothers some of the biggest albums of the decade,
I never meant to call you when it's wrong. I'm the one that sees like
and none of the master tapes belonged to him, everyone locked inside the label's vault. Furious, he appeared in public with the word slave written across his cheek,
Purple rain, purple rain, purple rain.
and changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol, telling Rolling Stone that his own name now belonged to a company instead of to him.
Be some kind of friend.
He spent years releasing albums back to back just to fulfill his contract and finally walk free, launching his own label and warning the whole industry that if you don't own your masters, then your masters own you.
It's such a shame, my friends. Purple rain.
Then, in April of 2014, after nearly 2 decades apart, Prince stunned everyone by re-signing with Warner Brothers under a completely different deal. One that finally handed him full ownership of every master he'd ever made with the label, Purple Rain included. "I got my stuff back," he told a reporter simply, closing out one of the longest ownership fights music has ever seen.